We are going to go ahead and get started. I think maybe the passcode might have confused some people, but that's okay. We got Zoom bombed a couple weeks ago, so we had to add passcodes to these. But anyway, thank you for joining us today. My name is Dana Catron. I'm the Deputy Director at Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State University, and then I'm also the SBIR Program Director for our New Mexico FAST program, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. For today's workshop, please feel free to ask questions. You can either use the chat feature or go ahead and unmute yourself. We like these to be really informal and interactive. And then Stephanie Garcia is also on our FAST team. She'll be monitoring the chat as well. If you have questions, you can direct them at her also. So let's go ahead and get started on the SBIR and STTR programs. For today, we're going to cover three primary things. So first is the SBIR and STTR programs. So what are they? Why should you be interested in them? Second is a very high level overview of the proposal process. So again, really high level. If you're interested in applying at the end, I encourage you to reach out to us and we can talk in more depth about which agency. And as you'll see, it gets a little bit complicated depending on who you're submitting a proposal to. And then lastly, we'll be covering really briefly the New Mexico FAST program at Arrowhead Center. So how can our program help you submit a SBIR or STTR proposal? So going right into these programs, SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR stands for Small Business Technology Transfer. We refer to these as sister programs, so they're very, very similar. We'll go over the similarities and then the differences, but really both programs have a collective goal of advancing innovation and getting those innovations towards commercialization. And so the federal government is very, very interested in helping small businesses do this. And so that is really the purpose behind these programs. The STTR program, again, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but the goal of that one, along with all of the SBIR goals, is to foster tech transfer between small businesses and research institutions. So kind of a critical difference, but still very, very similar programs. The first thing I wanted to cover before we get any further is eligibility. This is a big thing. If you're not eligible for these programs, I would not recommend applying because you will spend a lot of time on a proposal that will not get accepted. So the first criteria, you have to be organized for profit. So non-for-profits do not qualify under these programs. The business also has to be located in the United States, and at least 50% of the business has to be owned and controlled by one or more individuals who are citizens or permanent resident aliens of the US. So if you have any questions on eligibility, feel free to reach out. We can chat about that more. The other key eligibility requirement for these programs is your business has to be a small business. This definition is pretty broad. The SBA definition of a small business is less than 500 employees, which is most businesses in New Mexico. So we don't usually run into issues with that requirement with clients we work with, but it is something to consider. One more thing I wanted to point out before moving on is the purpose of these programs is not to purchase equipment or to commercialize something that has already been developed or something that's really low risk and just needs capital. It's really focused on early stage technologies and R&D work. So early stage, high risk is usually the two things we say. If you have those with your technology or innovation, you're probably a pretty good fit for these programs. The technical challenge focus, this is really important for both programs. So the federal agencies want you to solve a technical challenge with your innovation. Your innovation may have several technical challenges, and that could equate to several different proposals and projects under these programs. But having that technical challenge or gap that you've identified is critical for these programs, because that's what your project is going to be based around when you apply. So from the agency's perspective, if they can go out and buy it, they're going to do that, and that's not something they want to fund, right? So they want to fund something that's really novel, that again is high risk, it's very early stage, and you need the capital to get it validated so you can move towards commercialization. Solving that technical challenge or technical challenges, because often there are multiple challenges tied to a technology, is going to allow you to look at other things with it. So can that product or technology be made better by doing X? Can you cut costs by doing Y? So these are things that'll surface as you're starting to develop the proposal and start thinking kind of critically about what exactly you're trying to fund. So the Small Business Innovation Research SBIR program, why apply? Number one thing that we always talk about is it is non-dilutive or equity-free investment for your company. So the government is not going to require you to pay any of that money back at any time. So that's great. There aren't very many sources of funding that are non-dilutive. It also allows you to demonstrate the feasibility of your idea or innovation. Remember, this is for early stage innovation and technology development. So it's a great way to start showing that it is feasible without using your own funds to do that. You can start building your team and building your company for success. So a lot of really successful companies were started with SBIR dollars. They do help provide due diligence for follow-on funding. So a lot of angel investors, venture capitalists, those types of organizations like seeing SBIR and STTR awards tied to a technology, because it means the government has essentially invested in you, right? And so it's another form of due diligence as you're moving along that commercialization pathway. It also allows you to map your product and value proposition to your intended customer. Again, we kind of talked about this, but it reduces the need to self-fund your R&D, which can be very, very expensive, as many of you probably know. We'll talk a little bit about IP and data rights, but that's another great benefit of SBIR. And then one of the really nice things, especially if you're going after DoD, those kinds of agencies, is it puts you in a position for sole source contracts with the government once you get that phase one. So why is the government interested in these programs? They want to build a stronger economy for America. So the more businesses that succeed, that equates to more tax revenue, more job growth, et cetera. And small businesses actually account for 44% of the US economic activity. So small businesses are a huge part of economic growth. They actually produce 16 times more patents per employee than large businesses, which is a statistic most people aren't aware of. And so it's a great way, again, to stimulate that technological innovation, get more things commercialized, get those into the market. Small businesses also employ almost 40% of America's scientists and engineers. So to get that knowledge and the expertise, small businesses have a lot of that. And small businesses tend to be a lot more agile, more flexible, more mobile than larger companies. And so when they're developing these really high-risk technologies, it can actually be beneficial, especially when you factor in these programs. So quick overview on the two programs. They both support R&D and financing of innovative technologies. SBIR is the larger of the two at about $3.8 billion per year as an annual set aside. And the way they determine how much money goes into these programs is it's 3.2% of the extramural R&D budgets for all agencies with a budget greater than $100 million. So that means if an agency's research budget falls below the 100 million mark, they will not be participating in this program anymore. Or if there's an agency that is not participating now, but comes in above the $100 million mark, they will be required to participate in that program. So that's kind of how those work. STTR, again, very similar. It's smaller though. It's only 0.45% of the extramural research budget. So there's only 5 agencies that do participate in it. And that budget has to be greater than $1 billion per year. And that equates to about $518 million per year for these programs. Something to also remember, the small business is always, always, always the applicant and the awardee. So you can partner, you can subcontract with other organizations, other businesses, with federal labs, but you as a small business will always be the one submitting the proposal and managing the award if you get it. So some differences between the two programs. The partnering is a big one. So in SBIR, you are allowed to partner. It's encouraged. Partners, bring different strengths to your project, but you do not have to partner. With STTR, you have to partner with a research institution. And research institutions include national laboratories. So in New Mexico, LANL, Sandia, those are 2 research institutions, and then most large universities. So again, in New Mexico, it would be the University of New Mexico, NMSU, and New Mexico Tech. You can partner with any institution across the country. It's not limited by region, but that's just an example of what those RAs look like. For the principal investigator, for SBIR, the primary employment has to be with the small business. So that's over 50%. With STTR, the PI can be employed with the small business or with the research institution. So a little bit different there. For the work requirement, again, this is kind of tied to partnering. For SBIR, you can outsource up to 33% for phase 1 and up to 50% for phase 2. And with STTR, you have to excuse me, have at least 40% with the small business and 30% with the research institution partner. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but there are those percentage requirements. For IP, this is a big one between the two. So with SBIR, you do not need a formal IP requirement. With STTR, since you are partnering with one of those research institutions, that agreement will be required and it has to be signed prior to the award. So it doesn't need to be signed prior to the proposal being submitted, but before you get the award, you have to have that agreement in place. Agencies that participate, there's 11. This can be kind of confusing. There's 11 agencies, 12 different programs. We'll talk about this in just a minute. And for STTR, there's only 5. So SBIR is, again, a much bigger pool in terms of the agencies you can apply to. And then program size, we talked about this in the last slide, about 3.8 billion for SBIR and about 518 million for STTR. So they're both substantial, large programs, but SBIR is quite a bit bigger. So the participating agencies, everything on the screen participates in SBIR. STTR are the boxes in gray. So the 5 are DOD, DOE, HHS, which is more often referred to as NIH. NIH is under HHS, but most people apply to NIH, NASA, and NSF. So those are the 5 biggest agencies that participate in both programs. The one that's a little bit confusing that I kind of mentioned on the last slide, where there's 11 agencies but 12 different programs. Under the Department of Commerce, there are 2 SBIR programs, and that is NIST and NOAA. Now, to confuse you even more, under each of these federal agencies, there are different components under each. For some of them, like under Department of Education, it's just Department of Ed. But Department of Defense is a really good example of there are 14 different DoD components under the larger DoD, SBIR, and STTR program who all participate. And each of those components does their SBIR program just a little bit different. So there's Air Force, Army, Navy. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you kind of get the picture that there are a lot of different components and things to consider if you're going to apply to either of these programs. So we talk about SBIR as kind of one program, and then we say, oh, SBIR, STTR, okay, it's 2 programs. And then when you factor in all the agencies, it's like, okay, there's 12 different programs, but then when you factor in all the components, each one of those is a little bit different. So we make it our job at FAST to know all of the differences and know the requirements for each of these, so that if you do decide you want to apply, we can help guide you in the right direction in terms of requirements. So you're submitting something that is going to get funded. I'm not going to go through this slide in depth. We will be sending the slide deck out afterwards, but we did want to have it available for you just so you can see what these agencies typically cover. And again, some of them are very, very broad. I would say NSF and DoD are the most broad. They fund a lot of different things. Agencies like USDA are going to be much more specific, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity for you to fit your innovation or technology under one or multiple agencies. And again, that's something we would work with you on through our NMFAST program. So some of the differences between the agencies. On the right-hand side is a screenshot of our solicitation card. We do need to update it, so we'll be updating this soon. But this is a really high-level overview of when agencies are expected to open solicitations and then close solicitations. And some of them open multiple per year, and some only have 1 solicitation per year. And so if you're trying to plan your proposal schedule, especially if you're interested in applying to multiple agencies, this is a really great snapshot of, okay, so DOT typically opens in February. I should be preparing probably in December for that solicitation. And this is available on our website. Differences, there are a lot of differences between the different agencies. I could do an entire workshop just on the differences between each of the agencies, but generally the proposal submission process will vary. The proposal requirements will vary, and that includes everything from format and layout, page counts, content expectation, additional documents, things like that. The funding levels will vary. The periods of performance vary. I talked about the solicitations per year. Those vary. Some only once, some up to 3. When and how you are allowed to talk with either topic authors or program managers also vary. So some you're allowed to talk to them whenever. Some have very specific windows when you're allowed to reach out. The registration requirements also are going to vary, and then the funding vehicles vary. So again, we talk about these programs as like 1 or 2 programs, but really they're all very, very different. And so that's why we like to do these workshops and encourage you to reach out if you're interested, so that we can help you navigate all of the differences between the programs. So kind of going back to why should you pursue this? It's obviously kind of confusing. So you might be thinking, why do I even want to go after this? Again, it's non-dilutive funding, right? It's the government's way of investing in you as a small business. They're not going to take any equity. It's very similar to the process of seeking third-party investment. You're going to have to put together some kind of pitch, whether it's an actual pitch or a proposal. You have to know your product, the market, how it's going to be sold, things like that, or you have to at least project that. And again, we mentioned this earlier, but it will set you up for sole source sales to the government after you receive that phase 1. I think this slide is in the wrong place, so if that's confusing, I apologize. Getting back to the differences between the agencies. Some of them will have grants and some of them will have contracts. So these are the 2 funding mechanisms that both or all of the agencies use. So it's either going to be a grant or it's going to be a contract. For grants, these are typically less specific topics. So they're usually like NSF is going to say tell me what you think is innovative. Does it fall within these general areas that we're interested in? And you can propose something. For contracts like DoD, they're very highly focused, and DoD is going to tell you, we need a very specific technology that can help us do this. And if your technology or innovation does not fit within that and can't respond to the specific needs they have, then there's no point in applying, because they're looking for very specific things. So again, very different in terms of grants and contracts. Grants tend to be more flexible. They're designed to provide funds to support a public purpose, while contracts are very binding between a buyer and a seller for goods or services. So again, differences there. In grants, the PI typically has more freedom in defining the scope of work. Contracts, it's pretty inflexible. They're going to tell you what they want. Grants, again, more flexibility in the use of funds. Contracts, you're going to be showing your milestones and deliverables, how you're meeting those, and then you'll get paid. There's a lot more fiscal requirements, things like that tied to contracts. In grants, it requires best efforts in research, while contracts require delivery of promised goods or services, again, determined by that contract type. The Q&A for the solicitation are usually not made public for grants, while with contracts, they must be made public. That's one of those key differences tied to when you're allowed to talk to those program managers or topic authors. And then in grants, you as the applicant will define the scope of work. So you'll say, this is what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. With contracts, the government is going to have a much stronger hand in defining that scope of work for you. So the agencies that, I'm not going to, read this, but again, you'll have this for reference after. This slide just shows the contracting agencies, the granting agencies, and the one agency, which is HHS, who does participate in both. So that just shows the breakdown of those. Again, I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. It's more here for reference for you to go back to. But basically, we wanted to show all of the different agencies, the phase 1 award amounts, the phase 2 award amounts, the phase 1 periods of performance, phase 2 period of performance, and then the total program funding for that agency. So you can kind of get an idea of, how much money do they have available for these programs. Now, quickly on data rights and IP protection. If you have specific questions on this, again, I encourage you to reach out to us. It can be a little bit confusing, and we can talk through it more in more depth for your particular situation. But generally for SBIR and STTR, you as a small business will own and have full right and title to the data developed under your SBIR award. For STTR, like we mentioned before, you have to negotiate that and sign an IP agreement identifying the sharing of those data rights before the award. So huge difference between those two programs. Your data under these programs is protected for a minimum of 20 years. This is a recent change in the last year or two. It used to be 4 years, so it's a pretty significant change. And this is from the start of your award. You as the SBC have to mark SBIR technical data appropriately. And these data rights only apply if you have not protected the technology before utilizing SBIR or STTR funding to develop it. This is a question we get a lot. So is the government going to use that data? Most of the time, no. We work really closely with a lot of the different federal agencies, actually all of them with the SBIR program. And when talking to them at conferences and things, they have very few examples of when they actually use the data. And it's usually just to validate a test or something like that. But again, it's primarily used for evaluation of the results of the award. They do receive a royalty-free license for use, whether it's patented or not. But again, from our conversations with agencies, it's very, very rarely used. So The USPTO, if you have more questions on this, they hold regular webinars on this topic. We encourage you to go to this link. This has a really great tutorial on data rights if that's something you're more interested in. So something that is really unique about these programs, we call them a gated program. And that's because there are different gates essentially that you have to get through to move on to the next round of funding. So phase 0 is typically what we refer to as like the proposal stage. So this is when you would be working with us, or you would be working with some other organization. In New Mexico, if you work with us, you are eligible for microgrants. We have set aside funding available to help you develop some parts of your proposal that, say, we just don't have the bandwidth to do because we're a small program. So if you wanted to work with an accountant on your accounting system or something like that, we do have funds available for that. Phase 1, you will always be applying to a phase 1 proposal first. This is really the concept phase. So it's for concept development. There was that slide a few slides ago that shows the different funding levels, typically between 100K to 250K over 6 to 12 months for that project. And it's very, very competitive. So it's about a 15% success rate of submission across all of the different agencies. Something to note, STTR, the success rate is a little bit higher because less people apply to STTR. So if you're faced with an SBIR or STTR, and you're going to partner with a research institution anyway, we typically recommend going after that STTR because it is less competitive. After you receive a phase 1, you are then eligible for a phase 2, which is really your prototype development. So because it's prototype development, it's a longer period of performance. So typically around 24 months, 2 years. And the funding level is also higher to reflect that. So usually between $500,000 to $1.5 million. And the success rate is obviously going to be much higher because it's a much smaller pool of companies applying for those phase 2s. Something to remember that is again a little bit confusing. If you receive a phase 1, say with NSF, you could apply to a phase 2 with any other agency. So just because you had an NSF phase 1 does not mean you have to only go after an NSF phase 2. You would be eligible to go after any phase 2 with any agency. The demonstration phase, there are some second phase 2s, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing. We're not going to go into that too much because there are very few of these, and they're with specific agencies. There are also some direct to phase 2s with some agencies, but again, they're rare and they're really hard to get. And so we typically, when we're doing these 101 workshops, we like to keep it simple and say, get your phase 1, then phase 2. Then you can move on to phase 3. And again, we can talk about this more in depth if this is something you would really like to pursue. For phase 3, this is not tied to any SBIR funds. So this can be another confusing point. At this point, you really are kind of at the commercialization phase. So there's limited direct funding through these programs. The reason why we say it's limited is if your end customer is, say, the DoD, they can fund your phase 3. It's not going to be through their SBIR dollars, but they can fund it through other funding arms. So a little bit confusing, but again, gated program. You have to have your phase 1 usually to get to phase 2. You can have multiple phase 1s at the same time. Again, when you're thinking about those technical challenges for one technology, you can have multiple projects under that. So as long as you're not duplicating work, you can have as many phase 1s as you want. So the backbone of these programs, and I've kind of talked about this throughout the slides, is really innovation. You know, we talk about innovation a lot. That's huge for these programs. And innovation does not necessarily mean high tech. So some things that would be considered, say, low tech processes or products could be considered innovative. So one of the ones we like to bring up during these is a company or a business got funded for a comic book process for PTSD patients. So he developed a novel process for having PTSD patients work through these comic books to help with their PTSD, and NIH funded him for that. So it can come in all shapes and forms, again, not tied to what we would typically consider high tech. And it can start anywhere in the product idea chain. Commercialization is the other huge piece of these programs. So the goal of these programs is to get your high-risk technology commercialized. The programs don't define how it needs to be commercialized, but it should have potential to be commercializable. We don't know if that's actually a word, but we use it a lot with these programs. So you need to be able to at least project that it could be commercialized. Somebody's going to want to buy it for some reason. Years ago, when we started the program, it was not such there wasn't such an emphasis on commercialization during the phase one. That has changed significantly over the last couple of years. And now in the phase one, you do have to have a pretty good strategy for how that funding will be used. Customer discovery activities really, really help. So we encourage people to go through Accelerator programs that identify, markets, customers, things like that. We have some here at Arrowhead that we run that are really helpful to help you put together that piece of the proposal, which again, a lot of agencies are now requiring. I'm not going to go into this too much because I'm running slow on time, but these are some questions just to kind of think about as you're trying to establish commercial viability for that innovation or product, and as you're starting to craft that section of your proposal. So thinking about demand, your product services, market size, things like that. These are all really good things just to kind of keep the, to get the gears rolling so that you have a thorough section because they will be looking at that when the agencies are reviewing your proposals. For government contracting tied to underserved businesses or minority-owned businesses, there aren't any specific incentives under the SBIR or STTR programs, but there are for other contract opportunities. And I know Gabby at the MBDC in Albuquerque, they help significantly with this. They're a great resource. So a certain percentage of contracts have to go to historically underserved businesses. These include set-asides for, small businesses, 8A, women-owned small businesses, hubs-owned small businesses, things like that. If you go to certified.sba.gov, if you fall into any of these categories, you can certify yourself as a small business. There will be a few documents that you will have to upload, things like your EIN, articles of incorporation, things like that. But these set-asides can be a really great vehicle for helping to grow your business, and they can reduce the amount of competition on some of the opportunities. Again, not SBIR and STTR specifically, but if you're looking at other government contracting, this is a great thing to look into. And if you go to beta.sam.gov, that's also a great resource for more information on these. Okay, so going into the actual proposal process, I want to put a huge disclaimer out before we get into this, that this is very, very high level, because again, with each different agency, there's going to be a different proposal process. So this is a very, again, high level, just general overview of what you can expect. So the first thing you'll want to do is determine if you're eligible. So to qualify as a small business concern, and again, that definition is less than 500 employees. Are you for profit? Are you primarily US owned? Is the work you're going to be doing in the US? So make sure you're eligible before you apply. After that, you're going to need to develop your idea. So is what you have, is it high risk? Is it something that can respond to a specific need that the agency has? Does it fit within, for like NSF, any of their areas that they're interested in funding? So you'll have to ask yourself those questions before you want to proceed with the proposal. And the reason why, let me just back up. The reason why we take so many precautions before we really push you into the proposal process is for a first-time applicant, you can expect to spend at least 100 hours on developing your proposal package. So it's a significant commitment for a small business to put one of these together. And so our job as a support organization is to really ensure that you are eligible, that what you have is fundable, things like that. So you're not wasting precious time. Time is money, especially for a small business, putting together something that probably won't get funded. So if you work with us and if you work with somebody else, it's our job to make sure that you are in the best position possible to get an award. Okay, coming back to the proposal process, there are certain registrations that are required for SBIR and STTR, 3 specifically for all agencies. So number 1 is your DUNS, number 2 is SAM, System for Award Management, and number 3 is your SBA company registration. The DUNS does not take too long. SAM's takes a pretty long time still, and SBA doesn't take very long, but you do want to start these as soon as possible. And what we recommend is if you're even thinking about SBIR or STTR, to just go ahead and get registered. They're all free, but they do take some time. So it's best to just get them out of the way. Number 4, there are some agency specific registrations that are required depending on the agency. So again, once you start working with us or working with somebody else, we'll let you know what those registrations are, so you can get those done as well. The next thing you'll want to do is really determine the topic fit and talk to the agency. So make sure you review that solicitation and see if what you are developing solves their problem, especially for those contracting agencies like DoD. If it doesn't solve their problem, they're not going to fund it. They're always going to be interested in solutions, even if it's not the approach they want. So one of the things, and again, if this is something you're interested in, talk to us, because it's a bit of a process, but agencies like DoD say what you have is not reflected in their topics that are being released. So you have something great, the Navy is going to be really interested in it, but there isn't any topics that fit what you're doing. You can talk to the agency, and if they're interested enough in what you are developing, they can create a topic for your technology. So it takes a little bit of time, but it is possible and it does happen. So again, that's something you can talk to us about, and we can connect you to, say, the Navy or whoever it is that you want to talk to about that. So next up, you're going to put your whole proposal package together. We left this really short on the slide because, again, it's so different depending on the agency. But typically, you can expect to do some kind of technical proposal. Again, it's going to vary depending on the agency. You're usually going to have resumes of your team, show that you are qualified to do the work. Something regarding your facilities. You will always, always, always have to submit a budget. And then there's always going to be additional documents, again, depending on the agency. Once you get all that together, we encourage a review. So securing a third-party reviewer to look through your proposal. We provide those services for free. And that's also something you can use microgrant funds for through our program to pay somebody to review. And we have a lot of reviewers in our network who are actually reviewers for some of these agencies. So tapping into their expertise is really beneficial for your proposal package. After that, you submit the proposal. Don't wait till the last minute, and then you wait. So award notification can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, depending on the agency. Sometimes it's sooner, sometimes it's more. So again, depending on the agency, you'll hear back at some point. And typically, I would say for our clients, it's usually in like the 3 to 4 month range when they hear back, either good or bad. This, we need to update this, but this is just a really, again, high level snapshot of kind of the timeline process of what you might expect if you're going to develop one of these proposals. And this is, again, tailored to our services, so how we work with clients, but we created it so that you can see all of the different components that go into creating a proposal package. And there's a lot of different things that have to be done before you hit that submit button. So I won't go into this in a lot of depth, but it's here for you so you can kind of see what you might expect if you decide to pursue this funding. So the last thing I would like to cover is our FAST program at Arrowhead Center. And I've touched on it all throughout the presentation, but now we'll do a bit of a deeper dive into what the program can do for you. And I'm just gonna look at the chat super quick. Oh, okay. Don't need to answer any specific questions. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the slide into too much detail, but this is just kind of our story. So why we exist. We started in 2015 when we identified a pretty critical gap in the ecosystem here in New Mexico. And that gap was no dedicated support for SBIR and STTR proposal development. And to kind of back up, I should say no free support for SBIR and STTR proposal development. And so if you were to pay somebody, and there are many companies who will help you put together a proposal package, and there are many great ones that we can recommend, but the caveat is you're going to be paying anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 for them to help you. So our program does all of that for free. So the government pays us to help you put these packages together. So we've grown our program pretty significantly in the last 7 years. We're now on year 7 of funding. And we are funded through the SBA, again, to provide this support. So some of the things that we offer, obviously the free proposal development assistance, that comes in many different forms and will help you from the time you have an idea to when you're submitting that proposal to after you get the award and you need help with award management and going after your phase 2. So we'll be there the entire time. We do proposal package reviews. We do tailor our services for each client. Again, each of our clients come to us at different stages. Some of them have never even heard of the programs, and some of them have already received 2 phase 1s. So it just depends on where you're at, and we kind of tailor our services for you. Microgrants I talked about, those are up to $2,000 to help with proposal development. We do free workshops just like this, engagement activities all throughout the state. We've got a ton of tools and resources that we have developed on our website. So the link is here, and I really encourage you to explore the site and explore all of the resources that are available. If you're interested, we have a monthly newsletter blast that just has information specific to these programs. So it covers things like events that are coming up that cover SBIR, when agencies are opening solicitations, when they're closing solicitations, things like that. We have a YouTube channel with a pretty robust video series of many different topics related to SBIR. We hold an annual innovation summit every December where we bring in federal program managers from a lot of the different agencies so you can talk to them one-on-one. And one of the newer things that we're integrating is self-paced curriculum. So if you want to say explore NSF a little bit more, but you don't want to commit to working with us, you can go through this course and get all of the information you need and then do it at your own pace. So that's a really great offering that will it's actually live now. So we're eventually going to have every single agency available through that course. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. You guys can go back and look at it if you're interested. Again, this is the general process you can expect if you become one of our clients. And then these are just some of the statistics tied to our program. And actually the number of awards, this last bullet, is actually well over 9.2 million. I just forgot to update that. So the Living Library and website, again, this is what I referred to with the website. There are many, many, many different resources on there that I encourage you to explore. Stephanie is great at updating all of our quick start guides and proposal related documents every single solicitation cycle for every single agency. So there are a lot of different documents on there that are tailored to the most recent solicitation. Actually 96 proposal development documents. Our YouTube channel, again, 100, and actually this one needs to be updated too. I think it's like 160 videos now as of this week on, again, SBIR, STTR topics. And then the last thing I really wanted to cover is our SBIR Accelerator. So if you are interested in SBIR and you want some really directed guidance, we really recommend our accelerators. These are 12-week, for our agency-focused accelerators, they are 12 weeks long. You can come in and not have any of your registrations, and you will leave at the end of the 12 weeks submitting a proposal package. And so it's a very structured way to put your entire proposal package together. And we meet every single week. We do one-on-one sessions every single week to make sure you are on track to submit that entire package. So we have, let's see, 2 upcoming cohorts. So the first is the NSF Proposal Lab. This one is actually really exciting. It's a multi-state collaboration for proposal development for NSF. So if you're interested in NSF, this is a great one to take advantage of. This one's going to be shorter than our usual ones because we're partnering with other states. And so we have to kind of come to a consensus on how we wanted to structure it. So instead of 12 weeks long, it's going to be an incredibly intense 4-week, 8 sessions. So 2 sessions per week, working lab to get that entire proposal package completed. So it's doing a lot in a very short amount of time, but you'll have a lot of support that entire time. So again, if you're interested, I encourage you to apply. We will be doing a project pitch workshop next week from 10 to 12. There's more information at this link if you're interested in it. A lot of questions you might have will probably be answered at the project pitch workshop. The other one that we are getting ready to run is our Department of Energy ACSA. So this will be a 12-week cohort. If you have a technology that is clean energy related, this would be a great accelerator to take advantage of. It is part of our new clean energy cluster. Don't let that scare you. If you're interested in the accelerator, we will onboard you into the cluster. So it's not, you don't have to be part of the cluster to apply. Those applications will start to open in March. I believe we're going to be running it starting in May for this accelerator. And it's tied to the DOE release. So more information can be found at the link right there. And in summary, we do many things related to SBIR assistance. So we will help you find the appropriate agency or agencies, appropriate topic areas. We'll help you with your registrations, your proposal submissions, all of that. So if it has to do with SBIR, we will help you. And so we really encourage you to reach out if you're interested in this funding, take advantage of our services. Again, all of our services are free, so that you can, apply and get awarded. And with that, are there any questions? My contact information is here. Our website is on the screen here. We'll send this all out after the webinar as well. Feel free to reach out, and if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can drop them in the chat as well. Okay. Well, we will be sending out again the slides. Check out our website if you are interested in applying or just want to explore the resources. We have a lot there. And then again, I didn't really touch on this, but actually Vanessa made me think of it. If you need help connecting to, say, Lanel or Sandia or to a specific prime, we can help facilitate those connections. We work with a lot of, again, the primes, and then we work very, very closely with the research institutions here in New Mexico. And so we've got contacts that we can direct you to if that's something you're interested in. So with that, thank you, everybody. This will also be recorded and put on our YouTube channel if you want to refer to it later. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.